A team of astronauts embarks on a mission to colonize Mars, hoping to establish a new home for humanity. However, upon their arrival, they discover that they are not the first to set foot on the red planet. The night before their departure, the team throws a party to celebrate their upcoming journey. Among them are Nicholas, the bad boy who wants to have one last fling before leaving, and Woody and Blake, the only married couple on the mission. Sergei and Renee, two foreign astronauts, are also part of the team, along with Phil and Luke, who will be going in two separate teams. Luke is waiting for another astronaut named Jim to arrive at the party, but before he does, Luke talks to his son Bobby, who asks who will read to him while he is gone. Luke promises to read the same book every night that Bobby will read, so they can read it together in a way. When Jim arrives, everyone is happy to see him, but the mood quickly changes when he mentions his late wife, Maggie. Jim and Maggie had dreamed of going to Mars together and had spent their entire lives working towards it. However, when the time came, Maggie fell ill, and Jim withdrew from the Mars program to take care of her. Maggie eventually passed away, leaving Jim devastated. Luke tells Jim that he and Maggie deserve to go to Mars more than anyone, but Jim says it's okay. However, it's clear that he is upset as well. 13 months later, the team of Luke, Renee, Sergei, and Nick reaches Mars. They spot an unusual mountain, and upon analysis, they realize that it has a shiny top, which they assume is ice. They send a message to the World Space Station, letting them know that they will be exploring the mountain. As they approach the mountain, they hear a strange signal in their headsets. They use a radio wave radar to study the mountain, and the readings show that the mountain is made of metal, not ice. Luke tells them to move the radar closer and use more power to get an accurate reading. However, an intense energy pulse comes out of the mountain and destroys all their instruments. A tornado then forms, sucking in and killing Sergei, Renee, and Nick. Luke survives and discovers that the mountain was hiding a giant metal face. Back on the World Space Station, an emergency meeting is called because of the intense energy pulse from Mars, which has caused the loss of almost all transmissions. A video transmission is received from Luke, who is badly injured and reveals that everyone on his team is dead, killed by something unknown. Woody tries to convince the captain of the World Space Station to send a rescue mission for Luke, but the captain is hesitant because they have no way of knowing if it's safe to go to Mars. Phil suggests using information transmitted from one of the Saturn probes flying close to Mars to plan their mission accordingly. The captain agrees, and they prepare a new team for the rescue mission. Several months later, the crew of Jim, Woody, Terry, and Phil is nearing Mars. They observe 3 graves near the base camp of the previous team, which Phil thinks means that Luke is alive. However, Terry disagrees, saying that it just means there was no one left to bury him. As they prepare to enter Mars, micrometeoroids start hitting their ship, creating holes where the air starts leaking from. Woody and the team work together to seal up the holes from both the inside and the outside. However, they are unaware that the meteoroids have also damaged their fuel tank. As the team begins their launch into the Mars atmosphere, they encounter a dangerous situation. Fuel starts to leak out of their ship, and when they fire the engine, there is a massive explosion that destroys their entire ship. With no other options left, they are forced to exit the ship in just their suits and tether themselves to each other. They aim for a refueling module in orbit around Mars from the previous missions, but it's farther away from them than they had calculated. Woody takes charge and decides to take a risk to save the team. He takes the grappling gun wire, uses all the fuel in his jetpack, and flies full speed at the refueling module. He ties the wire to it, which gives the rest of the team a chance to reach the module safely. However, Woody overshoots himself and is left stranded in space with no fuel in his jetpack. Terry is devastated and insists on rescuing Woody. However, Woody knows that it's impossible because none of them have enough fuel in their jetpacks. He tells her to stop and go back before she runs out of fuel and is stranded too. Terry attempts to bring Woody back using the grappling gun, but the wire is just a little too short to reach him. Woody realizes that Terry will kill herself trying to rescue him. So he removes his helmet and sacrifices himself, so she stops. Jim, Terry, and Phil manage to land the refueling module on Mars and reach the base camp of the previous mission. They'd find most of the equipment damaged but repairable, which means they can go back home with it. Jim finds that plants are growing in the experimental greenhouse, and Luke appears behind Jim and attacks him. Luke is in bad shape, and thinks Jim is a hallucination, but Jim convinces him this is reality by telling him that he is reading a book that his son Bobby is also reading back on Earth. Luke calms down and tells them how he survived by growing plants in the greenhouse for a year. He tells them about the incident that killed the rest of the team, but instead of saying he survived, he says he was spared, and it was for a reason. He says he was spared to figure out the secret. Jim asks Luke what secret he is talking about, and Luke shows him a picture of the giant metal face. It turns out to be the famous face on Mars that was previously viewed from satellites, but was assumed to be just a mountain. Luke says it was placed there by someone for them to see. Jim asks about the signal Luke's team heard when they were close to the face, and Luke explains that he has been analyzing the signal for a year, and he's figured out that the pattern of the signal in physical dimensions made the picture of a DNA. He says it's a self-portrait from the beings that placed the face there, a declaration of their identity, a signature. Terry notices that the last pair of chromosomes is missing from the DNA, so it's not human. Later, as they are packing for the journey home, Jim spills some candies, which makes him remember his conversation with Phil. He realizes the DNA picture is not a signature, but a test guarding an entrance to an unknown place. It turns out that the first expedition perished because they answered incorrectly, instead of complimenting the DNA proving that they were human beings. The astronauts then directed radar at the face, but since the answer was wrong, the structure activated its security system, and the sandstorm destroyed the intruders. The team then heads to the things, but first, they send a robot and transmit a signal with the supplemented DNA through it. A bright light shines from an entrance that appears in the face, and everyone except Phil, who stays behind to fix the ship, goes to the face. Jim gives Phil the order to take off at a precisely determined time, even if they don't return. The people enter a white room, and the door closes, and the astronauts lose contact with the ship. Soon, the room fills with Earth's atmosphere, and the people remove their helmets. Immediately behind them, another airlock opens, and upon passing through it, the astronauts find themselves in a dark room where they see a massive three-dimensional projection of the solar system. That hologram of a Martian appears silently, explaining to the people that in the distant past, a massive asteroid struck Mars, destroying the planet's ecosystem, which strongly resembled Earth's. The Martians had to evacuate their race to other star systems, but also send a ship from Mars to neighboring Earth, containing the seeds of future life. Hundreds of millions of years later, multicellular plants and animals appeared on the planet, and no one could explain how it happened. Many years have passed since this panspermia, and the new forms that emerged from the sent DNA evolved and became humans. They were supposed to return home to Mars one day so that the Sphinx would recognize them as the descendants of the grandiose experiment. The Martian hologram disappears, and in front of them opens the hatch of a spaceship on which someone from them can fly to the new home of the Martians. At this time, Phil unsuccessfully tries to contact his friends and prepares for takeoff. The team hear his warning that the storm is getting stronger and will soon engulf the ship. They realize that they need to hurry, but Jim refuses to return to Earth when the opportunity to fly to another galaxy arises. He is assured that this is an invitation, and he was born precisely to reach the new world. Jim says goodbye to his friends, and Terry gives him a small rocket pendant to remember, which once belonged to Woody, and the astronauts leave. Meanwhile, Phil repeats the call, but not receiving an answer, he hesitates to press the launch button, and Jim enters a light elevator that lifts him onto the Martian ship. The two remaining astronauts barely make it back to the ship due to the sandstorm. Meanwhile, Jim steps onto a circle that appears before him and suddenly realizes that he can't move as water rises around him. The man braces himself for drowning and holds his breath, but then he takes a breath and starts breathing underwater. He smiles, understanding that this is a new form of life, and images of his past life flash before his eyes, and the man seems to say goodbye to everyone once again. The team wishes Jim good luck, knowing that his friend is finally doing what he was destined to do. And with this scene, the movie comes to end. I hope you enjoyed the explanation. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.